Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emmy Amarati, and I'm Assistant Director of our ACU Online Writing Center, and I'm here today with our lead tutor, Christy Apostle. Say hi, Christy.
Hey, everybody.
The topic of this webinar is how to make a bad infographic. We'll be posting the links to this recording and the slide deck for the webinar to our Online Writing Center website, and the links to the resources in the slide deck will be active. Before we get started, let us tell you a little bit about the Online Writing Center. You can check out the Online Writing Center group in My ACU by clicking the top link. In the second row, you can watch the linked video for the steps to make an appointment and submit a paper. We do work with you at any stage of your writing, and to do this, we offer two types of appointments. The first is an email asynchronous appointment for which you upload your paper, and then the tutor sends you feedback by email in 24 hours. We also offer real-time Zoom appointments. For those, you just go to the schedule at the time of your appointment, which is in Central Time, and click on the Zoom link. You can access many writing-related resources on the fourth row with our Online Writing Center website link. And last at the bottom, there's a link to fill out a form to give us feedback on our webinars, which we really appreciate. It helps us create better products for you. So now that we've done that, let's move on to our current webinar on making a bad infographic. The first learning objective for this webinar is to understand the function and design of infographics. And second, we will workshop CSDO 330 Week 1, Assignment 1, the domains of language infographic. And I'm going to turn it over to Christy to do our learning objective 1.
Hi again. So, our first learning objective, as Emmy mentioned, is to understand the function and design of infographics. With the goal of creating an infographic in mind, considering why they're useful should be beneficial. For instance, they help viewers engage with information creatively. As Hibbard et al. Explained, learning methods that captivate learners and allow them to engage creative processes can help foster deeper learning. So, for all learners, the presentation and accessibility of information can be just as important as the content. And this is where infographics are an invaluable learning tool. So, another reason we're looking at the why here, another reason to create infographics is that they allow diverse learners the ability to access complex information through a well planned design process. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about the design. Why infographics should be created connects to how they are used. For example, because infographics provide visual interaction and are widely distributed in online settings, they are tools that are becoming increasingly used in many fields. In addition, design matters when you shape an infographic. It impacts an infographic in many ways. Elements like color, spacing, font, and image impact an infographic's design. And although the color choices in this image are complementary, the word's placement and the handwritten nature of the letters causes inconsistencies, which can damage the professionalism needed in an infographic. So there are some design do's and don'ts that we're going to talk about. As you think about designing your infographic, a do to think about is the CRAP principles described by Williams. These come from the acronym and represent contrast, which means when you want to make different elements on your infographic, make them obviously different. And that will help them stand out from one another. So also use repetition at times in your infographic by repeating key elements. This will contribute to coherence and unity. So even though you have different elements, you can repeat colors, repeat heading sizes in order to build that unity. Next in our acronym is alignment. So you will want to align elements across intentional lines and margins. So for instance, if you have headings always at the left, then your viewers will always know where to access a heading. And then finally, the last part of the acronym is proximity. To use proximity, place elements that belong together close to one another. So for example, if you have a heading, it should be closer to the content to which it belongs than it should be to any other content. All right, in order to continue talking about what you should do as you create your infographic, now that you are equipped with some core design principles, deciding which program to use is the next step. Here are some common programs that people use to design infographics. And as you see, these are all linked. So if you want to explore them, you can. Canva is super popular. Another program that is often used is Infogram. Pictochart. Depending on your access to Adobe, you can try Adobe, or even your knowledge of Adobe, because it gets pretty complicated, but Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Express. And two more, there are many more out there, but two more that you could also explore are Venngage and Visme. At this point, you may have forgotten that this webinar is mainly about making bad infographics. So let's consider some characteristics of bad infographics, or some things you should not do when you're creating your infographic. So you don't want a vague headline at the top. So the headline at the top needs to draw in your viewer. And so it needs to capture your main topic in an engaging way. And it needs to be specific enough to your topic to do that. Another thing that you won't do is include no image at the top or near the top. You'll want some sort of image to also draw in the viewer and engage them. And that will encourage them to scroll down and keep reading the rest of the infographic. In addition, don't include scattered images or words with no logical alignment. We talked about alignment a bit ago. So if images and words are at different positions, different spaces, and they're not all at the left or all at the right, or maybe occasionally even centered, then your viewers won't know why they're there or how they relate to the content around them. Also, don't use cliche clip art. This will detract from the professionalism of the infographic. And honestly, your viewers have already seen a lot of that clip art. So you'll want to find something new and fresh to keep them engaged. Also avoid multiple fonts. Too many fonts will make the reading more difficult. And you will also need to avoid overly small or overly large font sizes. So try to be pretty consistent with your font choices. For instance, all the headings can be one size, and then perhaps all the text might be a different size, but every piece of text is all the same font size. Also avoid a text-heavy infographic. Your viewers won't want to read through every single line, because an infographic should be a tool that grabs them and gives them necessary information in an engaging but succinct manner. Also, don't use messy and unnecessary punctuation. So, for example, if you don't have complete sentences, you won't need periods at the ends of lines. If you have a heading, it doesn't necessarily need a colon after it, because if it's bigger than the text below it, then your viewers will know that it's a heading without a colon being included. There are several more characteristics that you may spot on a bad infographic. For example, don't use poor contrast. So you might see this on infographics where the heading is dark and the background is dark, and that makes it difficult for your viewers to really read content such as a heading in an accessible way. Also, don't employ poor or tight spacing. So you don't want headings so close to text that they seem to kind of crowd one another. And you don't want spacing that, again, has no proximity. So make those headings close to the content to which they belong, but not overcrowded. Avoid colors that do not depict your topic or organization. So, for example, if you're talking about, let's just say, a medical condition, and you've got some serious information to convey, you're probably not going to use bubblegum pink as a color to complement your topic. Don't use no repetition at all, or only rarely use repetition. So you do want to repeat those key elements, as we mentioned earlier, for coherence and unity. Also, don't overlook the need to cite. So include a citation as needed, and include it thoughtfully. So don't just cite at the end of every sentence, for example, and don't include your citation so small that it cannot be easily viewed. Maybe choose a thoughtful place. It can be under an image, or it could be bottom right of an infographic. And if your infographic is online, then including a link for that citation is also helpful for your viewers. Now let's check out an example of a bad infographic. I think we're prepared for that at this point. As you can see on this sample infographic, images are scattered in random spots. There's no logical alignment. So for instance, some of these, some images are centered, some are at right, some are at left. And without consistency of the placement of the images, the viewer's eyes are kind of scattered as well all over the infographic. This bad infographic also shows the use of cliche clip art. So we have, apparently the designer of this infographic likes transportation. And so they decided to include a plane, a car, and 2 bicycles. But these aren't complementary at all to the functions of language, which you see, hopefully you see, is the topic for this infographic there at the top. Also, this example shows what happens when multiple fonts are used or font sizes change. So most of these headings are kind of a medium-sized font, and then on the right under the plane, all of a sudden emotive is a lot bigger. So the viewers will wonder, like, is this the same sort of heading? Is it a more important heading because it's a bigger size? And you can also see that on this infographic, there's a lot of text. A viewer might look at this and think, I really don't have time to dive into this. It's just too text heavy. Poor contrast is also evident here. Looking back up at that heading, language functions, it's pretty difficult to see because it's a dark font color on a dark background. So definitely a lighter color would make that heading pop more. You can also see that there's poor or tight spacing on this infographic. For example, if you look back at that big heading emotive, it's almost on top of the text of the first line underneath it. And then if you look on the left, the second heading is actually closer to the content before it than to the content after it. And so there's no proximity there. There's not a lot of repetition on this infographic. You see that there's different colors on the images, for example. You see that the bar graph image is on top of text. So it's not placed below the image at a reasonable space, like maybe some of the other images are. I mean, it's not placed below the content at a reasonable space. So what you would prefer to do is to put content all in its same spaces. So for example, even conclusion at the very bottom is way off to the left. Well, if you're going to decide where you want your headings, then to put them in the same place each time. This actual template, infographic template, is set up to center all the headings, which is not occurring at present. And then in addition, the source citation isn't very clear. It's actually embedded in the text. And so it's kind of buried. Even though this is small, I promise there are a lot of in-text citations in the text. And so you can't really easily distinguish which source informed this infographic. So a close-up of this bad infographic can remind us of the CRAP principles discussed earlier. I've already alluded to some of these. Looking at contrast, there are dark colors on images and words. So this use of this darker color, like the dark blue, for example, does not provide adequate contrast for viewers to sufficiently see the content. Considering repetition, placement of headings above their corresponding content is inconsistent, and font and image size differs. Thinking about alignment, the headings and the images are not consistently aligned, as we talked about. So phatic is over to the right, emotive is over to the left, referential seems to be centered. And so the same thing happens with some of the image. The image above emotive is centered, but the image after referential is to the left. And so including your images at the same space, the same alignment will support easy viewing for your audience. And finally, emphasizing proximity here, headings and images are at different distances from the text. So viewers won't understand like why a motive is closer to the text than some of the other headings are. And consistent placement of headings and images in relationship to the content to which they belong provides proximity. For further research, you can feel free to consult the sources that informed this first learning objective for the webinar. They're here for your perusal if you would like. And now I will turn over to Emmy to guide us through the second learning objective.
Thank you, Christy. Our second learning objective is to workshop CSDO 330 Week 1, Assignment 1, the domains of language infographic. This is a link to the assignment in Canvas. The course is Language Development and Disorders for our Communication Science Disorders program. So, the purpose of the assignment that we're focusing on for application is as follows. This week, you learned about the 5 domains of language: syntax, semantics, pragmatics, morphology, and phonology. Create an infographic to synthesize information you have learned into a format that is easy to share with parents, teachers, and/or caregivers. So in other words, you're going to be using this infographic format to make the information more accessible to other people who may not be as much of an expert about these things as you are. So for the instructions, pretend as if you are a speech-language pathologist working in private practice. Design a one-page infographic you can share with families that identifies, defines, and provides examples of the 5 domains of language across the early lifespan: infant, preschool age, and school age. Each domain should include at least 1 to 2 examples specific to an age. For example, pragmatics for a preschooler include the ability to express reasons or excuses for actions. From a practical standpoint, the infographic needs to be 1 page on regular sized 8.5 by 11 paper. You should include a minimum of 1 reference properly cited in APA format. And here's the assignment rubric. You can see that you get 10 points for creating a 1-page infographic that is well organized, easy to read and understand, and aesthetically pleasing, making use of fonts, colors, and graphics. So you do need to have pictures and different colors on your infographic. Then you get 12 points each for explaining each of the 5 domains with a definition and examples. And finally, you get 5 points for both referencing and citing in text at least one source in APA format. So here's an example of what a section of an infographic for this assignment might look like. The example that we've used for the domain is pragmatics. So I've clearly listed the domain, pragmatics, given the definition, the social use of language, which varies across cultures and individuals. And we've given 2 examples at the bottom as required by the assignment. So an example for an infant would be an infant says ball while pointing to request the item, or a school-age child speaks slowly and simply to a baby, but adjusts to use more complex language with an adult. And although this is a limited snip of a larger infographic, we can still see the CRAP principles at work within the image. For instance, the dark text contrasts well with the lighter green background, so it's easy to read. And while we've repeated the same font, we can see contrast with the larger font for the domain, acting as a sort of heading for the section. The bold font of the definition also contrasts with the non-bold font for the examples. The bullets help create a visual pattern of repetition, as do the repeated colors within the illustration. And the image is relevant to the text because it illustrates the first bullet about the infant saying ball. The text is also aligned in rows and at the margins, and the proximity of all these elements to one another, unified by the green shape underneath, signal that they're related. And one other thing you may notice is that the text includes an in-text citation for ASHA after the definition. Since APA citation and referencing is an element of your assignment, we're going to take a few minutes now to look at how to do that on an infographic. First, we're going to go over how to format references and in-text citations for 2 types of sources, a journal article and a page on the ASHA website. So this first example shows how to cite a journal article in APA format. The reference is at the top, the reference format. So first we put the author's last name and their initials. Here we have Michelson, comma, E, period. If he had or she had or they had a middle initial, we would also put that. So E period space J period, for instance. Next, we put the year of publication for the journal article in parentheses. Here we have 2024. The title of the article goes next, and that's written in what we call sentence case. Sentence case means that we capitalize only the first words of the title and the subtitle and any proper word forms. Here we don't have a subtitle or any proper word form, so the only thing we've capitalized is the W in the first word, what. Next, we need to provide information about the larger journal in which the article is published. So we put the title of the journal in what we call regular title case. Title case means that you capitalize all the major words, including prepositions and conjunctions of more than 4 letters. So we have inquiry capitalized, we have an capitalized because that's the first word of the subtitle. But we do not have of capitalized because that is a preposition that is less than 4 letters. It only has 2. It's tiny, so no capitalizing there. After the title of the journal, we need to put the volume number, which is also in italics. That's the 67 here. The issue number goes next in parentheses. That's the 8, but notice that that is not in italics. And the comma between the journal the journal title and the volume number is also not in italics. After another comma at the end, we put the page range. And last, we put the DOI number, or if there's no DOI for the journal article, you can put a publicly accessible URL. Regardless of which you use, the DOI is preferred. But regardless of which you use, both the DOI and the URL should begin with https://. In APA, it's pretty easy once we've written the reference to figure out how to cite, because APA applies a format that we call author date citation. So for a paraphrase, which is preferred for an infographic, we'll be naming the author followed by their name. So if you are writing that in a sentence, you can put the author's name in the sentence and follow their name immediately with the year in parentheses, as shown in the first example here. Michelson, parentheses, 2024, argued that language is a multi-tool shaped over time by the development of many languages across diverse cultures. This kind of example is called a narrative citation because the author's name is part of your sentence or narrative. Notice that if you decide to name the author in the sentence, you will use a past tense verb. Here we have Michelson argued, because according to APA, all work that has been published was created in the past, and therefore you need to refer to it in past tense. More likely on an infographic, you're going to use the type of citation modeled on the bottom of the slide, which is a parenthetical citation. So for this type of citation, you name the author and the year in parentheses, separated by a comma. Michelson, comma, 2024. In a paper, you'd place this citation at the end of the sentence that contains the borrowed idea, and that may work in an infographic too, but we'll go over a couple of options for citation placement in a minute. First, we're going to look at how to cite a page from the ASHA website in APA format. In this case, we still follow APA's author date format. ASHA, which is actually the American Speech Language Hearing Association, is an organization, but in APA, you can consider an organization as the author if a work doesn't have an individual author. So notice that even though we usually refer to ASHA as ASHA, we need to write out the full name of the organization in the reference. That is an APA rule. Do not use the abbreviation, write out the full name. So after we write out the organization name, we need a date. When a work is not specifically dated, as we sometimes see on websites, we use the abbreviation N period D period, which stands for no date. In APA, we don't use the copyright year for the website as the date. So for this page, there was no specific date attached right to the article, and that's why we've put the ND. After the organizational author and the date information, we write the title of the web page in sentence case, and it's also in italics. So for the sentence case here, again, there's no subtitle and there's no proper word form, so we only capitalize the L in language, the first word. Next, we usually would put the name of the website after the name of the web page or the article that you're citing on the web page. But in this case, the organization is both. The organization is the author and it's the name of the website. So APA says that when that happens, you can be simple and only write the name of the organization once in the author position. So that means that the next and last element of this reference will be the URL, which again starts with https://. Our in-text citations will again follow author date format. So we're going to use the organization name for the author, which is the American Speech Language Hearing Association, and we'll use the notation N period D period for the date. So if you only use one or two citations of this source, which is quite possible in an infographic, you would just spell out the name American Speech Language Hearing Association in each citation. So perhaps in the corner of a box or at the end of a sentence that came from it, you would write parentheses, American Speech Language Hearing Association, comma, N period, D period, close the parentheses. But if you happen to name or cite ASHA at least 3 times in your work, you can follow the format shown here. On the left, it shows what to do for the first use. You provide the full name of the group on the first mention in the text, followed by the abbreviation in parentheses. So if the group name appears in the narrative citation, include the abbreviation before the year in parentheses, separated from the date by a comma. The American Speech Language Hearing Association, parentheses, ASHA, comma, ND, close the parentheses. On the other hand, if you want to put the name of the American Speech Language Hearing Association in parentheses for a parenthetical citation, you would put the author's name written out in full, which is the American Speech Language Hearing Association. Then in square brackets, you would put the abbreviation ASHA, and then you'd put a comma, and then you'd put the ND. So this is what you would do for the first citation if you refer to ASHA at least 3 times in your composition. If you happen to then do that for subsequent uses, meaning the second, third, and so on, you could just use the name of the group as in the acronym form in the rest of the citations. So we've got, again, with the date information, ASHA parentheses ND explained, or pragmatics includes taking turns in conversation, parentheses ASHA, comma, ND. So as we mentioned earlier, there are different ways to cite on an infographic, just as there are different ways to cite on a PowerPoint or a slide presentation. So if limited content on the infographic is actually borrowed from a source, or if you're using multiple sources, then you may choose to cite the same way that you would in a paper. For instance, in the example on the left here with the babies, I only used the ASHA source to inform the definition of pragmatics, and I made up the examples myself. So for that reason, I put the parenthetical citation for ASHA, comma, ND just after the relevant detail. On the other hand, if the information in a group of ideas came from the same source, then it's usually acceptable to put the parenthetical citation in the lower corner. That's why we've got von Buren et al., period, comma 2024, in the bottom corner of this little yellow block on the right. That shows that the citation relates to all the information in that group, and putting it in the corner makes it less visually disruptive. And we can see that these would both be part of the same infographic. So we've got some repetition going on here with the color. Those yellows and those reds are repeated, and the different shades of green are similar. We're using the same font and the same pattern of bolding the name of the domain and the definition while leaving the examples not in bold. So even though these aren't set up in a large infographic display, you can see how it might work if you made a not bad infographic using these elements. The last thing you need to make sure you do for this assignment is make sure you include at least one reference in APA format on your infographic so that the reader can interpret your citations. And a good spot to do that is the bottom right corner of the infographic, as Christy mentioned earlier. And that's what we've got here. Since we're being friendly and engaging to an audience, under the reference heading, I wrote, "For more information, please see," so that they understand that the reference isn't just, hey, this is where I got my information. It's where you can go look for more information. And if you include the reference at the bottom right, it closes the infographic out at a logical spot where the viewer's eye will leave the page. So we went over a very limited number of examples for citation and referencing here. If you need help formatting citations or references for different types of sources, of course, you can consult your APA 7 publication manual or the official APA website, which is linked here. Or you can email us a quick email at the Online Writing Center at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu, just saying, hey, I need to cite this source. I think I need to do it this way. Am I right? Please help me. And we will answer you as quickly as possible.
So today we have reviewed key concepts and text to understand the function and design of infographics, as well as workshop CSDO 330, week 1, assignment 1, domains of language infographic. If you would like to find out more about the Online Writing Center, you can go to the Online Writing Center homepage that Emmy mentioned earlier. Again, we offer this video that's linked here that will outline the steps that you will take to make an appointment and submit a paper. Remember that we are happy to work with you at any stage of your writing, brainstorming, drafting, revising. There are two types of appointments, as Emmy mentioned earlier. The email and asynchronous appointments, in which you will drop off your paper and receive feedback from a tutor within 24 hours of the appointment time. And also the real-time Zoom appointments. When you're ready for that, you would go to the schedule, click on the Zoom link. Just remember that all of those appointments are in Central Time. And you can also access many writing related resources on our online writing center website, such as blogs and even past webinars. To schedule appointment and submit your paper, you would first go to the schedule and make the appointment at WC Online, and then you would upload the paper to the appointment form. You do not have to do this at the time you make the appointment. You can always navigate back to the schedule and upload your paper anytime before the actual scheduled appointment. If you would like to reach out to us, as Emmy mentioned earlier, you can email us at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu with questions. You can also follow this link in the second row to schedule an appointment. You can explore our online writing center website at the link on the third row. And then finally, we have that fantastic feedback form that you can fill out that will help us make better webinars for you in the future. Some additional resources you might like to check out include the APA course paper template from the Online Writing Center, which is here in the first row. You see the link there. It will help you set up and format your paper, and it's all ready to go according to APA style for formatting. You can also check out our YouTube channel, where you will see some webinars and other helpful resources that linked there on the second row. And then finally, the Online Writing Center blog has blog posts on many different topics that are quite informative and helpful. Some of them address APA, some of them address grammar. Also, we have a series on using AI or not. So please check out that third row and the link there if you would like to explore our blog. As we've kind of alluded to, there are other webinars. You can always, as shown here on the left, you can go to our website to see the past recordings of our webinars, or subscribe to the YouTube channel that I just mentioned. If you're interested in some upcoming webinars, writing a grounded analysis will be released virtually by Wednesday, May 21st at 7 p.m. Central. And also, this is a real-time live webinar that you could attend, writing about SMART goals and patience, will be on Thursday, June 12th at 6 p.m. Central.
And those webinars are both for the course that this webinar addresses. So they're good to keep in mind.
Definitely. So thank you, everyone, for watching this webinar from the ACU Online Writing Center.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.